Welcome to the Prosthetics and Orthotics podcast with Brent Wright and Joris Peels. Hello, I'm Joris Peels, and this is another edition of the Prosthetics and Orthotics podcast with Brent Wright. Hi, Brent. How are you?
Hey, Joris. It's good to be on. We've got a special one today. I'm excited about today.
Okay. So who's on today?
So we have Paris Butterfield, and what's interesting about Paris
is that he got a name straight out of Hogwarts, man. This is like... No, seriously, it's like the potions professor. That's amazing.
Well, yeah. So we will be talking about the dark arts a little bit later on.
Okay. Yep.
But what's interesting about Paris is his journey really in the bracing realm. He's a consumer, a patient, so to speak, of orthotic devices. He wears bilateral ankle foot orthoses, or AFOs, and he's been on a journey. And one of the things he's pushed me on from way back in the day is we tried to FDM some of his braces, and it was just a colossal failure. And this was, that was a long time ago. So anyway, he's been on the journey with me. And it's been neat, and he gives really great feedback. So he's a computer programmer, and so he's very technical in nature. So he gives great feedback on what's good, what's bad, and so we'll kind of dive into that as well.
Okay. All right, that sounds great. So welcome to the show, Paris. Welcome.
Thank you.
And so, well, my first question always is, how did you get into O&P? So for you, I think it's a bit different, right?
Yeah, it's a great question. So surprisingly, on September 11th, 2001, that was actually the first day that I went to get fitted for a pair of AFOs. Very interesting. Wasn't a great day, but it stood out in my mind. Yeah. So I got fitted for a pair of articulating bilateral AFOs, and they're made out of carbon fiber. They were very heavy and very loud. And I had to deal with that because based on where I was and the healthcare that was available to me, I was in New York City. This was the only place that people generally went and that hospitals recommended. And I was pretty much on that train until I left college. And I moved to Raleigh, North Carolina, and met Brent. Brent completely decided to flip things around and say, yeah, we're not making those anymore. We're going to try something different.
Okay. So first off, so you got your first prosthesis when you were like a teenager, right? Or something like that, or?
Yep. Around like 10, 11 years old.
Okay. And what did you do before that? Was it crutches, or did you not need them, or?
Didn't need them before, but I was constantly like tripping and falling. So I was always the kid in like summer camp who was way behind everybody else, walking really, really slow and usually like falling a few times a week.
Okay. And what do you have? What's yeah?
It's called Charcot-Marie tooth disease. So it causes weakness in like the hands and feet.
Okay. But your problems with your hands are kind of more manageable or less prevalent, or is it like?
Correct. My biggest problem, at least for me, and it's different for everyone who has a disease, but for me, it's like walking. It's with my like legs and feet.
Okay. And so, okay. So I like that you gave the feedback of it being too loud. Was that a problem for you? Was it like, did it just like make you feel really weird that every step would be clickety clackety, like this kind of plastic kind of stuff?
Yeah, I remember like I put the first time I tried to modify a brace was I put zip ties to try to stop the articulation. I remember I put like a rubber eraser so that way when the articulation at the joint would come back down, it would be more quiet. But yeah, it was a big deal for me because I'm a kid in school, and like, you can always hear me coming. It wasn't pleasant. Yeah. It's something that I know that if I met Brent sooner and technology had advanced back then, that I would have had a way better experience with wearing AFOs.
Yeah. And what was it like? I mean, as a teenager, I think you need to be kind of like thick skins and stuff. Because I mean, I remember being a kid like that age, and I said all sorts of stupid things, and other people were saying all sorts of stupid things. Was that difficult for you, or?
Definitely difficult. It was hard just like wearing the braces. They're heavy. They were uncomfortable as well. But
Mhm.
there was basically like I would say like a machine. Like this is what they gave kids who lived in the Bronx, and luckily it helped me walk, so it prevented me from falling. So I'm
Yeah.
not gonna say terrible things
Uh-huh.
about them, but they just
Uh-huh.
weren't like completely ideal for me.
Okay, okay, but that's good. I mean, I think it's important to be. I think a lot of care situations, if you're not kind of articulate and if you're not like explicit in what you're, they're just gonna, you're gonna make do with whatever like the standard solution is. I mean, and I think I like that. So also in these AFO things in the Bronx, I've been there, and there's a lot of uneven streets and stuff. Was it difficult to kind of just get around in a kind of urban landscape?
Yes, it was. And you bring out a good point about like being able to like speak up. Um, one of the first requests that I had was that they build out like a certain portion of my brace and put like padding in it, because
Hmm.
initially I just received them and they were like, okay, here, you have braces now. But I immediately gave feedback because they hurt really bad.
Hmm. Yeah. And did they always hurt like that, or did you improvise stuff as well? Did you try to put cushions and padding and all sorts of stuff yourself? Or?
Yeah, I tried to improvise, but the next iteration they ended up flaring out one of those areas and putting some sort of cushion, and it virtually eliminated the pain that I was having there.
Okay, that's good. That's something. But I'm surprised actually you were in New York, and you would expect that to be kind of like there's so many people focused together, so many people concentrated there. You'd expect that to be a good area for to having prosthetic care and stuff like this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I can't speak for like all around the country, but I feel like uh, any advancement that happens now in prosthetic care is really good for like the end user.
Hmm.
I guess this is back in 2001, so there weren't that many advancements. They definitely didn't have to the point where we had printing. But I remember they were made out of carbon fiber, and they had like a whole carbon fiber like fabrication lab in the building where I used to go get them, because I used to watch them like actually make the braces and stuff, because I was curious then too.
Hmm. Yeah. So, and carbon fiber sounds space age. Everybody wants carbon fiber glasses, carbon fiber bikes, and stuff. And but to me, it's always very brittle. Did you like it as the materiality of it? Did you like it, or did you feel cold to you? Because it feels cold to me, like
It
cold
didn't have
emotionally. Yeah.
it didn't have a bad feeling in that sense, but I was always like breaking down in terms of like the articulating joints that they gave me.
Hmm.
So there was always this one screw, and I feel like it was every few months that I was going in and I was like, okay, this screw is now stripped or it fell out.
Hmm.
Can you give me like what can we do here so I don't have to like keep, you know,
Hmm.
going in constantly?
Yeah. And do you think we oh, are you talking by the way? Because I can't hear you.
No, I'm not talking.
Oh, okay, that's super weird. Okay. Anyway, so and did you find it like we always talk about customization and like that really or making a different color so it would let kids like kind of feel more ownership of it, may feel it's like more of a part of them. Did you feel that or did you miss that because you weren't able to customize them or were you like I need to customize these things?
No, surprisingly, they were able to customize. So I had like New York
Okay.
Giants was like the first one I had. I think I had like NASCAR patterned on the outside. So they
Hmm.
allowed for a lot of that customization, but it wears out quickly like when you become a teenager. Um
Yeah.
and you're just like, okay, I want whatever doesn't like draw attention.
Okay, okay. Ah, okay, okay. So you just don't and why is that? Because you just want to belong like a older teenager kind of wants to belong or something like that?
Yeah, like you want it to blend in as much as possible.
Hmm.
Like even to the point, I don't think we've explored this yet, but like it would be cool if they were skin toned. That
Hmm.
way they could blend in completely, and people, if they're looking at your shoe, they won't notice. So yeah, at some point I was just like absolutely no customizations, straight black is fine.
And Paris, can you share a little bit about shoes too? It's super easy to find shoes for these things, right?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So that was a huge thing. Most of my friends, they were wearing Timberlands, and they were wearing like, really specific like Jordans, and this brace was really big and really heavy, so I was never able to wear the same
Yeah.
shoes. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Eventually I wore like, boots. Boots seem to be, and living in like the Northeast, that they're pretty acceptable
Hmm.
to wear boots all, for the large majority of the year.
Hmm. And that's just a size thing, right? Is it just like they're too big, or is it?
Well, the brace would be able to fit down in the boots, but yeah, finding sizes was hard too, because I remember when I went from the jump of wearing braces, it was immediately like 3 sizes up.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the fact that I'm trying to imagine you to fit, because the Timberlands dates you, right? So, you're a kid living in the Bronx, right? And you're a NASCAR fan, right? And
Yeah.
I'm still stuck on the NASCAR.
Yeah, yeah. I wish I had a picture of that very first pair, but yeah, they were
Uh,
definitely NASCAR. And the next one was like they were. I think it was the Giants.
okay. That's okay. That's more. I think that's more acceptable there. But I like that, like, because now what people are doing, they're designing these kind of like really cool braces, really cool AFO. So it's interesting to see someone who just says, no, no, no. I just don't see it.
Hmm.
Don't see it anymore. And then, so what changed when you moved to North Carolina and met Brent? What was the big change for you then?
So that articulating screw, I initially like had a problem. So I moved away. I had just graduated college. I actually got a pair of braces before I left, because I knew that refinding like a new person to make my braces would be really difficult. And they gave me a whole bunch of screws and Loctite and like, hex keys, and they were like, good luck. Uh, so that only, and that worked for a very long time, until one day I snapped the screw in the socket and could not get it out. And at
Oh,
that point, like, I'm living in North Carolina, I don't know anybody, and I am like panicking, because I used to have a plan. I used to be like, okay, I need to make an appointment with this doctor so they can get me, a prescription, then I can go. So at this point, I'm like completely like not able to figure out what I need to do next. So I go on Google,
mhm.
and I search for people who make orthotics and prosthetics in my area, and I find Brent.
Okay. So just come with, no, not like you didn't get introduced. Nobody recommend him. Is like literally Google.
Yep, literally Google, and surprisingly, it was on the exact
Yeah.
same street where I lived, so
Okay, that's
that one
convenient.
that one worked out.
And then another thing, because we were talking about it from the prosthetist viewpoint. But I know in America, like, health insurance is kind of also very important and stuff. Did that deter you as well? Did that make you kind of like really kind of like, is that a buying decision for you? Where you're like, oh man, what is this going to cost? Or do you feel that as a client, let's say, that you feel, oh, this is totally going to be covered. I'm gonna be okay with this.
For me, I had just gotten like my first, full-time job out of college, and my
Mhm.
thought was, if I want to continue working at this job, I need braces.
Okay.
So the cost was like not even a concern to me.
Okay.
Whatever it was, I was going to pay it.
Okay. Cool. And then okay, so what was different about how Brent helped you? Let's say.
When I went in to see Brent, he immediately fixed my brace within like, I feel like 5 minutes. He like took them off, and like I took them off, and he fixed the screw and made it even more durable than it previously was. And
Mhm.
then I was like, oh, okay, thanks. And I was ready to leave, and I was like, well, can you make me another pair that is exactly like these? Like, exactly. And he just looked at me, and he was like, I can, but I think I'd rather like try something different.
Yeah, and I mean that was the funny part, is because these braces were so massive, and they made the noise, and all that, and I knew that, they might have been right for him when he was 10, but now as a young adult, they weren't right for him now, as far as the way they function with the joints and that sort of thing. And so that's really kind of where my head went, is like, we can we can make you the exact same thing, but if they're going to perform very similarly to what you have, don't you want to perform better? But I mean, he was a little bit of a tough nut to crack on that one, because it was like, I've had these the same way every single time, and I think we came up with some sort of deal like, hey, if what I do doesn't work, I'll make you the exact same, or something like that. And I think
Okay.
he went with that.
Yeah, that was pretty convincing to me, because I was like, okay, he must be so sure of himself that whatever he's about to do is going to work, that he would be willing to, make the other ones. So I was like, okay, I'm with it. Like, I'm down to try something new.
Okay, cool. And what was and like? You seem to have a good rapport. I mean, I'm noticing this now during the thing. Was that important for you? The click, that like the human to human saying like, "Oh, this is a guy I can work with," or something like that. Is that a really important thing?
I mean, the click happened immediately when he fixed my old braces within
Okay,
seconds,
okay,
and I could walk again. The trust was there like immediately. But yeah, even just talking to him, he seemed to be like very aware that like I was potentially nervous about this new interaction with someone who I had never met, and he was really like reassuring.
yeah. Okay, cool. And then and how was the new design, and how could you influence this new design? Were you able to, or did you feel that you had like input in this, or?
Definitely, because the first thing I told him was it needs to have
Mhm,
padding. Like, it needs to have padding, because I had known that, previously I got a brace that was made without it, and it hurt really bad. So I told him we need to add padding in these
mhm,
areas. Um, so I basically was taking over the design aspect
mhm.
of that, and telling him what he needs to do. But obviously Brent is very skilled, and he did listen, which was really nice.
Okay, okay. And in terms of the aesthetics, did you have any kind of demands on that, or was that like super not important to you, or?
No, it was not important to me. I was just interested in something like different, like if it could be better.
Mhm. Okay, okay. And then, and what was it like? Like, how different are they? I have no idea what you got afterwards. What was like the difference in the, or maybe Brent can explain this. What was the difference between what he had before and what you guys gave him then?
Yeah, so he was in what's called an articulated style AFO, so it has joints around the ankle so it can kind of move freely. But what I knew that Paris needed was, he needed some sort of spring. And so what we did is we made a plastic, and we thermoformed it, but it had multi layers. So we were actually able to tune this plastic spring for him so he could, you know, spring forward to the next step, and also give him some stability while standing, because his current braces, or his old braces, had the joints, and he would have to kind of lock his knees out for stability, just so they don't bend. Whereas with the style of brace that we were thinking about, the spring would actually keep him more stable, and then he wouldn't have to try to lock his knees out for stability.
Mhm.
So those were the main things, is how can we get him a little bit more dynamic so he can go and have, we call it energy return, step to step. But then also when he's standing in lines, and that sort of thing, you can be very, very quiet while you're standing, and not locked your body out, and you have to really think about it. Our goal was to make sure that he didn't have to think about it
What do you
much.
mean by this lock your body out? I have no idea what you're talking about. Like,
So when you some like, if you're ever in a line, if you bend your knees, that's a lot of work. So he would actually push his knees
mhm,
backwards,
mhm.
and then it would just kind of lock the braces out, lock his body out, so he could stand up for a long
Okay,
period
but
of
I've heard
time.
that actually, if you're a
So that's what I mean.
soldier, if they're a soldier, you always they tell you not to do that because then you can faint, right? If you do that really long.
Yeah, there is truth to some of that. I think there's some blood issues and that sort of thing, that you start losing some blood flow and such. But for him, it was just a mechanical way of him to stay stable.
Okay. Was that a lot of work previously? Did you really have to, like Brent says, like you have to like focus, like I need to stand now, I need to lock my knees. Is that like a thing, or?
Yes, And every time, like, fast forward, I guess, almost 10 plus years, when I stand in these new style of braces and I don't move and I can be like completely still, it's amazing.
Okay.
But yes, it took a lot of effort. And when we got that new pair delivered, they hurt. And I was leaning forward and giving more force, like towards the front of the brace where the calf area is. It hurt tremendously.
Okay, okay. And that was the new one.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was. Yeah, the new one. It took a lot of convincing that this was going to be the long term solution.
Well, and he was also sore because he's using muscles that he's never
Uh,
used before.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a double whammy. He's taking pressure in areas that he's never had pressure before, but then also he's using muscles that he's never used before. But the thing that I think really sold it was, I think we even took a video and I showed it to him, like how well he walked and how symmetrical it was, and like when he has pants on, you would never know that he's wearing braces.
Yeah, I could pick up speed. It was for the first time. This sounds so strange. It felt like I was walking like outside, like I was actually powering the walk instead of like the braces holding me back.
Really? But what does that mean, like, psychologically? What do you mean by that? I mean, does that mean that you were like, you had to kind of drag them along before or something, or is that kind of like?
Yes, yes, definitely. I felt as if I was actually controlling going forward, and the braces were assisting me versus the braces were like, in the old case, the ones I was wearing for previous 10 years were just holding me
Okay,
back.
okay, okay. And also, I think I'm still thinking about this thing about you standing in one place, kind of thing. Does this mean now that you're like, with the new braces, were you more likely to kind of, um, are you more likely to go out? Are you more likely to stand and talk to someone because it's less effort? Is it kind of like, I'm really lazy, so so I think like that.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I mean, so at that point in my like technical career
Mhm,
too, like I started traveling more. I'm like, at airports, and just being able to like, stand in line made it way easier than, having to wear the existing braces, and use that much effort to keep myself like,
mhm.
standing straight.
Yeah, and now you guys are like, how long have you guys been working together on this? And like now, so this was like when you first came to Brent, was like when, like years ago, or?
It's probably like 2012,
Yeah, okay.
2013.
So it's like a 10-year thing or something like that. So does that kind of evolve? Because you kind of like, how often do you see each other? Because it's kind of weird. Like I understand it's kind of like maybe like having a tailor, kind of a relationship with a tailor kind of thing. Like you know a lot about each other. It's kind of
Yeah.
intimate, but then you don't see each other every week. You see each other like every, like, I don't know how often, right?
There's some points where like I probably have gone at least maybe like 2 years without seeing Brent, I would think. Um, but every time I meet up with Brent again, and I'm like, oh, well, usually it happens because it's either time for a new pair, like the pair that I have is worn, and
Mhm.
Brent will be like, oh yeah, I have a completely new design. Like Brent is like the equivalent of, he took and this is why like I knew even after the first pair that he made that this was really going to work.
Yeah.
Brent runs his he creates orthotics and prosthetics in the same way like a software company.
Mhm.
He's constantly
Mhm.
iterating. Like what you currently have on is like a revision
Mhm.
that is like, 10 revisions behind. He's already changed things and made things progressively better for somebody else. And now you can benefit from that too, because when you come to
Mhm.
him, that person has been wearing it already. And, you're going to get the latest and greatest like innovation.
Okay, okay. And I think it's interesting. So you're a software guy, and is that in software? I mean, it seems like it's a lot of sitting behind a desk kind of thing, but there's also meetings and there's also stuff. Are there any kind of specific things that you really need from your bilateral AFS, or for because you work in software? Or?
Not necessarily, but traveling, going to conferences and stuff, definitely need like, to be able to move swiftly, go back and forth between sessions. Um, so that was something as things expanded that I really needed.
Hmm.
And just in personal, like just being able to travel a lot more. was also something that I needed.
Give him a sense of like, okay, so like before, like in your articulated AFOs, at least from what I remember, you were less active. So just tell me a little bit about, you know, kind of what your day would like or how you would plan it out. But now it's like you can just go, it seems.
Yeah, when I wore the articulated AFOs, I knew that like if I had them on for, maybe more than like 3 hours, I was going to start hurting because they're equally like heavy. So every time I'm trying to lift my foot, like that's a lot of energy that I'm using. I think we had some numbers of like how much they weighed. And I think at its max it was like 2.5 pounds each. So that's for someone who has CMT, any extra weight is pretty significant. The lightest as possible that you can get is really better. So yeah, just on a day to day, and I had those articulating AFOs all throughout college. It was pretty difficult. I was going up and down stairs constantly. Traveling between class to class. When I got the new style that Brent made me, I started working in software and lots of meetings, lots of traveling, kind of similar things, but in
Yeah.
like the
Okay.
same building.
And do you think, and how have they changed? Because we've gone through a bunch of design now in the last like over the decade or so, or a little bit less than a decade. How have they changed for you? You say that Brent always has new iterations. I mean, what's been the kind of differences for you, like day to day? Let's say.
So the initial pair that he made me was completely like thermoplastic. And I would probably say it had more material. So the back, which we now have it as like the carbon fiber strut, um, the brace has been erased, if that's the thing that you would want to say. It seems like Brent has lessened the amount of material over time that my brace actually uses, which in return for me means that the brace gets lighter, and it also means that I have more energy that I can use
Okay.
to
Okay.
walk.
All right. So, and you guys also tried out some 3D printing stuff, which I was told it was not exactly very successful initially.
Yeah, it cracked like within seconds.
Are we supposed to say that live, yours? I mean, everything works first
Yes.
time,
Yeah.
every single
Yeah.
time, right?
No, I like this. I like knowing that this stuff can break and shatter. Like this is good. This is
Yeah.
good.
What material?
So it broke like literally
Yeah.
immediately.
What
Literally
material
immediately.
was that, Brent?
Well, so I don't know if you it was like when I believe it was a Pet G, but this was like I had met a guy that was like, man, I'll 3D print anything for you, and he's great, and he's super like the stuff that he prints is like investment casting patterns and that sort of thing. So he's like, hey, I got some Pet G, I'll print you something, and so like it was Pet G. zero point 0.4 millimeter nozzle, who knows, like 30% infill. And so you know that it's just going to be like looking back on it, it is going to be a disaster from the very beginning, right? Um, but what was neat is that we were actually able to use, even though it broke, we had the digital file. We were actually able to use that to make the final. So it was a great way to see if it actually fit. So kind of like a test device. But yeah, it was underwhelming as far as the performance of it for sure.
Yeah, and like, so Paris, have you got like you've learned a lot about this apparently, like right over the years, right? And have you kind of like brought your software expertise to bear? Is that something you're trying to think of, like using stuff you learn in software to kind of make these things better for yourself? Or
Definitely. So after that initial like iteration that Brent had printed, I was still really happy because at least he tried. So at least he tried
Mhm.
and it failed. And I know Brent well enough that that try wasn't going to be like the last time that he tried. Yeah,
Mhm.
I kind of got that sense from him because I'm always going to him and he's always iterating. I'm like, I still had hope that one day, like we would be
Mhm.
able to um 3D print these braces, and I'll tell you what that really means to me and like how I'm thinking like super future um about the benefits of 3D printing. But yeah, I was really happy. that he at least tried then. So I guess I'm really into this. I think about it from the software perspective, and in the last maybe like 6 to 9 months, I started seeing that 3D scanning had been getting a lot better. So I kind of went down this rabbit hole of trying to learn everything that Brent
Okay.
has learned, which is not even on the same scale, but I learned a little bit.
So yeah, we'll take a. I want to hear about that because Paris is very unique as far as in the sense of his technical capabilities and what he's able to do and what he wants to learn. But we did end up doing multi-jet fusion braces. There's a top section and a bottom section, and it's connected by a dynamic carbon fiber strut that is custom tailored to his weight and activity. One of the interesting things about those struts, though, is you remember that his braces previously were articulated, so literally no resistance. Well, I wanted to give him a little bit of flexibility, and what's neat about these struts is that you can interchange them and make them stiffer or less stiff, more flexible. But what was interesting is I thought that he would go for the more flexible. And so when we started trying these, he goes, "No, I want it to be stiffer." And then he'd get even more of a bounce in the step, longer step lengths, even more stable. And we ended up going all the way to the stiffest strut that we could put for him and his body weight. And I think that's just a testament to the idea of design and dynamics for orthotic and prosthetic devices, because you would think that if you had an ankle that moved, it would be more natural, but that's not necessarily the case when we're talking about braces and lower extremity weaknesses, which what Paris has. So, just curious, Paris, if you had any insight into those struts too and how that changed for you.
Yeah, I definitely so I guess for going from the complete thermoplastic to having the struts, I definitely felt more power in my step. I felt as if like the landing, like if I'm, going downstairs or something like that, that the brace really felt stronger. And any confidence that I get, just like with the weight thing being lessened, there's a confidence aspect of it too, knowing that as you're stepping, as you're about to make the step, that you're not going to fall, is really helpful.
Is that could be? I would just be terrified all the time of that kind of stuff. Were you at first? Do you deal with that? That's nice that you brought it up. Like because that to me is always like the idea that makes me most scared of this. Is like because I don't think I would be a very good prosthetics person because I would be afraid all the time. Is that something you experienced or?
No, I'm not afraid. It's funny because like the amount of times that I've fallen in these braces, I would probably say is like once or twice, and usually it's
Okay.
uneven pavement that happens. But that's probably in 10 years. I very rarely like even have the concern that I am going to fall. And when it happens, it's like completely shocking because like, well, what happened here? How did I end up on the ground? Um, but yeah, I don't have that
Okay.
fear
Okay.
at all.
Okay, that's good. Good. And so, what did you when you said you wanted to learn about these prosthetics? What did you end up doing? What did you end up? How did you end up kind of getting deeper into the subject?
So I had gotten a 3D printer probably maybe a year or two after Brent had made that. Um, he had that printed in like the Pet G, um, and I started playing around at home. And the first thing that I did was we have this heel wedge that I use. That we put inside of my shoe, in between like the brace and the shoe. And I got some TPU, and I tried printing it. So I got some
Hmm.
calipers because there was no like scanning or anything there, and I got like exact measurements. And I went into one of your like one of the popular CAD programs, and recreated it, and I printed it and tested it in my shoe,
Hmm.
and it worked.
Hmm. Okay, and did that also make? What did you do after that? Because I think that would be very kind of addictive. Kind of, like, oh, I could do this. I could do this.
Yeah. So I probably sat on the sidelines for a little bit. I think from the local library, I got a 3D scanner, one that works with like an iPad, and I tested that out because I was like, well, if I can scan the insides of all my shoes, then I can make like better wedges. But I realized that because of like coloring, it's hard to do scanning, and scanning was this is probably about like maybe 4 years ago. It just wasn't completely there, at least at the consumer level, like what a consumer could purchase. Um, so I continue to wait, and I think now we're getting a little bit better with 3D scanning. I think now we have some scanners at the consumer level that are a lot better. And now I quickly learned that the software is also the thing that has not caught up. It's very hard to take a 3D scan using like open source software and then try to convert it into something that you can like manipulate in like CAD.
Have you heard of Mesh Mixer?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have. I have heard of Mesh Mixer, and I have been using it, but it's still not the best thing in the world. Like I know from a software perspective, like using it, I can see like, oh, there's definitely something better than this.
Yeah, no, well, it doesn't exist. That's the problem. Or it's really expensive. It would be really
Yeah.
expensive. The alternative is really expensive. That's the thing. And then, and what kind of other additions have you made? Are you looking forward to make, or what do you want to change as well?
So I guess my biggest thing is I love that we use the strut on the brace because it's modular, and I asked Brent to send me the scans or the files for the actual parts of the AFO, and I wanted the ability where if I had a failure or if I'm like on vacation, to have a spare that I could print myself.
So
okay, cool. And is there any kind of other functionality you want to add?
well,
Oh,
and
sorry,
so
you
Joris,
were saying something?
we've talked about that somewhat before of like who owns the files and who, and this is where I trust Paris that he's going to do as far as the right thing for himself, obviously keeping him safe. But I just think it's interesting because we have had a failure on the road. So I'll share that story. Then Paris can add his color commentary to it. But this was 2020, right before COVID stuff, right? Or is
No, this is after. This is after. This is like in the thick of it.
Oh yeah, so
Yeah.
AMUG was happening. So anyway, we were so excited because Paris got invited to speak about his experience, and he was going to be the first person in AMUG history that's an end user to talk about the devices that have made his life better. So we were thrilled, and so I'm on the way down. I'm on the plane, and this was happening in Florida. And I'm on the plane. I land, and I see this kind of frantic text from Paris with a picture of the brace broken. So here we are, and Paris is like, do you want me just to fly home? We can cancel. We don't have to talk about it. And this is what's crazy about the modularity of the design and all that stuff. But as I was leaving the house, I had printed a second pair of braces for Paris, like just in case. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna throw them in my suitcase just in case. And so I text Paris. I said, "You won't believe it, but I have your extra set of braces, and we'll swap it out for you when we get there." And so I get to the hotel, and literally it was probably 3-4 minutes, and I swapped it out, and he was able to rock and
Yeah.
roll.
And I keep like backup screws in my book bag, just especially if I'm traveling like a long distance, and I have like Loctite just in case. So like me and Brent are literally in the lobby of this hotel, assembling the brace completely, and then I'm just walking again without problem. It was really amazing.
Yeah. No, I can imagine. So, and do you have any kind of like? Well, first of all, do you have any wishes that technology can't make right now?
Yeah,
Or?
so I will say like shortly that so Brent sent me the files. I did use Mesh Mixer. There was a part of one of the braces that we eventually like filed down or cut. So I didn't want to have to do that manually. So I opened it up in Mesh Mixer and remove that part. I also want to go and say this. I think it's very cool to have the files, but I also think it's very important to note that if you make modifications that you could potentially be doing something to like harm yourself. And the more research that I started doing and asking Brent questions, he made me aware of this, but I also came to some of those conclusions on my own. So it is cool. I definitely think there's, features that you could add, but you should be very aware as a user of like what those features could potentially mean, because you wouldn't want like to have a setback. I think it's important to like use Brent to like trust him in making those features. If you want to make a duplicate, maybe that's fine, but yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. And kind of like dream things you would want, like would it be like a robot, kind of more robot functionality, more stability? What would really make a difference?
So my dream thing would be that you could go in any country to a place like CVS or Walgreens, and they would have the ability to print your braces. If you had a failure and you were away from home and you didn't have your backup pair, not that failures happen all the time, but just the reassurance that you could have multi-jet fusion anywhere in the world, like that is really interesting to me. And I think I know there's like processing time, and some of these things they take like 24 to 48 hours to make, but that's my wish, that you'd be able to just recreate things instantly, kind of. If we get there, that's where I hope technology will go. And to be honest with you, seeing how far it's gone in the 20 years that I've been wearing braces, I think it's possible.
Okay, that's very helpful, and thank you for sharing your story, Paris. It's been wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Brent, thanks for being here again.
Oh, this is great, and it's always great to have a patient perspective and end user perspective, and I think it's good for clinicians to hear that interaction. I think it's important, especially as we're exploring these technologies.
Totally agree. Hey, thank you for listening as well. This is another episode of our podcast, and the Prosthetics and Orthotics podcast. Tell all your friends, and thank you for being here with us today. Have a great day.